Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that'll have you coming back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back and hope that today's episode is one that you will find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So, before we get into the main event, people, if you are on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes of the podcast. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. And for our listeners who would like to contribute to this podcast financially and help us grow, there's four ways in which you can do that. The first is through Cash App using our handle $IDTALK4ED. If you're on Venmo, you can use our handle @Kwame SM. And if you have a PayPal account, you can access the URL paypal.me/KwameSM. And for those who have been with us from the beginning, if you would like to continue to support us, please consider being a forum member. The forum is our new exclusive membership space for that Day Talk community. Over there, you'll be able to get access to behind the scenes footage of the podcast. You'll be able to get some other perks as a way to show our appreciation for all your support. To learn more about the membership tiers for the forum, you can go to our main website at IDTALK4EDucators.com. And for those who need something to add to their library before this year is over, maybe it can be a Christmas gift. If you do celebrate Christmas, of course, please consider adding Learn to Relearn to your holiday list. This is the book that continues to be a blessing, not just to myself, but to so many people who have purchased the book. The response continues to be overwhelming. And I'm just thankful for those who have either recommended the book at their schools, those who have left reviews about the book, those who have taken pictures with the book and have shared it with loved ones. All the support is greatly appreciated. I do not take it for granted. I promise you that. Now, if you're somebody that wants to learn more about the book, you can always go to the book's main website at learntorelearn.com. Over there, you'll be able to have access to some free resources, and you'll be able to learn more about each of the chapters there in the book. And then if you're someone that has a book and you love what you read, please leave a 5-star review on either Amazon, Goodreads, or wherever you leave your reviews. Your reviews will help increase the visibility of the book across multiple online book retailer platforms. So every review counts. Thank you again, and let's keep on supporting each other. All right, people. So, you know what? I'm a little sad because, real soon I'm not going to be doing this anymore. Coming on your screen and letting you know about the next guest and the guest after that. We have one more episode with a featured guest before we get to our series finale of this podcast. But listen, we're going to finish off with a bang. And today's episode is one that I feel you will enjoy. I know I will. Today's guest is somebody who is an inclusion specialist. She is someone that has worked in multiple countries and has done incredible work in the field of inclusion globally. And I've just been amazed by the amount of work she's been able to do across these different international contexts. And I'm excited to learn more about her story. And I hope you'll be excited to listen to what she has to say. So without further ado, I want to bring on Lauren Jones to the podcast to share with us her story, her journey, and where she is today. So let's bring Lauren on. Hello, Lauren.
Hey, Kwame, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for accepting the invite. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be with you. I've just transitioned and made a big international move permanently to Cyprus. So in a little state of there's a little uncertainty in a good way.
And yet you still find a way to keep yourself busy. I feel like I just saw you a couple days ago doing some presentations, and now you're here with me as you are making this major transition with your family. So I don't know how
It's
you
true.
make this happen, but you make it look easy.
Thank you. That's so kind. Thank you so much. I'm learning about, how I can find balance even in the uncertainty. I was in a call with Juan, who is the secondary principal at Luanda in Angola, and he was
Yeah, Juan, that's my guy,
I know. I like
my
him
mentor.
doing some work with them, and I had the best conversation with him. But he was talking about how, as nomadic people moving around the world, ourselves, we ground in ourselves and in the people that we care about and love. We find grounding in that because it can't always be in space or in physical stability. It has to be in ourselves. Find grounding in ourselves, and I really have been holding on to that in this transition. So that's how I'm still working and doing all these things. I'm passionate about it and finding some grounding within.
Yeah, and we're going to get into all that. So before we do, we always like to start from the beginning, which is giving our audience some context about how you grew up and how you became who you are today. So I know your journey starts in North Carolina, right below the Mason-Dixon line, growing up in the South. So talk to me about that early upbringing and who or what inspired you to want to become an educator?
I'll be really honest. I had a really great education in elementary school. I can recall Miss Kudva was her name, my third grade teacher, who was just a very innovative teacher that taught us in a hands-on way that brought all kids in, and this we built a really strong community. I remember being inspired by her as an educator. I had great elementary teachers. I didn't as a child or even as an adolescent think I would become a teacher. And then actually I grew up very religious in Baptist churches, as you sometimes would in the South. And in college, I was teaching Sunday school and teaching third grade Sunday school, and I loved teaching these kids. I had the best time, but I resisted becoming a teacher because I knew in the U.S. what that meant financially for me, and I was like, nope.
Mhm.
I was on a pre-med track in college. I was going to become a pediatrician. I knew I wanted to work with and help kids, but I resisted becoming an educator at first, and then honestly, finally, a series of events in college, I realized it's more important for me to be happy and fulfilled in the work I'm doing than for me to make a ton of money. And so it was a good realization. We all have to come to that potentially at some point. And for me, I decided that I was going to become an educator because I knew it was where my heart was, and that I would figure out a way to figure out the finances of that. So that's kind of my path to becoming a teacher. So I changed my major to elementary education when I was in college. And that was from teaching Sunday school. Not a lot of people know that I grew up really religious, but that's
Right.
my
I think being North Carolina, I mean, if you know a little bit about North Carolina or just even the states that are in the southern part of the United States, southeastern part, then you know that's part of the fabric. Yeah.
It
So
really is. And used to resist kind of talking about it, and I have become more open to talking about it because it's part of my story. It's part of how I have become who I am today. And even if I don't hold to the same beliefs that I held to growing up, there are values that were part of that upbringing that have shaped who I am. And then there's other parts of it that have evolved very much, and parts I have moved away from. But it's still a part of my story. So now I speak about it in a way that I used to. I think I used to feel a little more ashamed of pieces of that part of my story, and now I tell it as part of who I am.
as you should. I mean, as you should. Now, looking at your K to 12 experience, I'm trying to see what the through line is because given the work you do in inclusion, I'm wondering if any inkling of that started during your time as a K-12 student, because I know for a lot of folks, I mean, even myself, I was a student that had an IEP my first 4 or 5 grades. I was in a learning support classroom. And when I became a teacher, and I'm dual certified, one of my certificates was in teaching students with moderate disabilities. But I was a math teacher for all my years in the classroom. But that's my connection. So I'm wondering if you have maybe a similar connection that stems from your K-12 experience, where it had an impact on how you showed up in that setting.
Such a good question. I think so I remember in elementary school, I tell the story sometimes when I'm presenting, that there was one young man that was in one of my classes that I remember he got kicked out all the time because he was naughty, right? He got in trouble and he wasn't allowed to be in class with us. And I recall having a very sure reaction that wasn't okay. I was even no one had to tell me. I just knew, like, I don't understand why he can't be with us. I don't understand why we can't. I loved him. I found him to be very endearing friend of mine. And I didn't understand why he couldn't be with us and why he was always getting kicked out, pulled out of class. So I remember that in elementary school. And then in middle school, I had a teacher named Miss Brown, and I'm gonna tell her about this podcast actually, because now we're connected on social media. But she, unlike any other kid, those kids that throughout time had always been the ones that were in trouble, right? And kicked out of class. And, it had different punishments throughout school, which I know these are words we aren't using now, but this was like the environment at the time. She loved those kids. And she found a way to find their strengths and to be their champions. And she was very open about it. Like, these are my kids and I love these kids. And it was for me, so I was so inspired by her. There was something that was very, I connected with her in such a real way that I hadn't with another educator. I also think my own schooling experience, I felt the need to be, to perform in a way that really, I had to work really hard to do really well. And I did okay in school. I'm not the top performer, but I was definitely trying to fit myself into boxes that were not natural to me. Because that was what was valued, right? And I think that's part of what has shaped me now in terms of looking at systems and removing barriers and building on strengths. Like, if I had that in my own school experience, and then these students that I'm telling you about that I was, bothered by watching their experiences, if we had that, how different the outcomes would have been. It took me a long time to realize what my strengths were. It took me a long time to understand that it was okay that I wasn't great at certain, subjects in high school because I was good at other things, but that was never the conversation, right? You had to score this on the AP exams, or you had to have this GPA. And I was always striving for that. And there was a lot of pressure around performing the same as my friends, or around expectations of, various people in my life. So I think there's multiple kind of entry points to how I moved into this, into this work. But really, and I know we're talking mostly about K-12, but when I became a teacher, I was very quick. I moved into elementary education, and it only took me a couple of years. It was the kids for me that were struggling in class with the way that we were teaching, and for the ones that were in trouble all the time. They always ended up with me because I love those kids. So I ended up really embodying the Miss Brown persona, of the kids that were kicked out, that were suspended all the time. Those are my kids. And I was going to figure out some way to be sure that they were with us, because I saw what incredible value they brought to the community. So that's when I really was like, oh, this is my work. I was about 24, but I think those K-12 experiences shaped that in me, of course.
So then I'm wondering, what were some of the factors that shaped your perception of what a good student is? We hear this term, good student, and while it has a lot of subjectivity around it, I think the open-endedness is what causes it to be misconstrued depending on who you ask, right? And I think this is a perfect segue into what we're going to ultimately talk about with what you do around just inclusion and really going into neuroscience of how students learn.
Exactly. I think growing up, a good student, how it was communicated to me what a good student was the one who was high performing academically, who potentially was an athlete, right? Or also high performing in that capacity. But a good student truly was the one who was on student council and doing the clubs and things like that, leadership, and then also performing well in class. And performing well in class meant getting high grades and getting high test scores. And that was my school experience. There was not, I didn't feel, I mean, of course you had certain acknowledgements of students that were, had social skills that may not have had academic skills that were, I guess, recognized in the same way. But overall, like the picture of a good student, the way it was communicated to me in my schooling by most of my teachers and leaders in the school communities was that you perform well. You perform well on your tests, you have a high GPA, and you go to a great college and maybe get a scholarship, and that's a good student. It's not someone that works hard, someone that has innovative, creative ideas. No. Like you fit into this box, and this box says that this is how you make the grades, right? And the grades mean you're a good student. So I can recall that very clearly, that was what I was aspiring to. I wasn't aspiring to be creative or to solve problems that the world was facing at the time or be really innovative. I was striving to get a GPA that meant I was in the top 10% of my class so that I could, be recognized at graduation. And now I just look at it and I'm like, there's so many missed opportunities still, because that's still a large part of the narrative. And I think we miss so many opportunities with our kids of really highlighting their strengths and their gifts and building on the innovative capacity they have, because we're still focused on your GPA and your grades and your test scores and how you do in the IBDP. And I just, there's too much greatness out there that isn't going to fit into those boxes, and we're missing that. Now you've got me really going.
Yeah, and your experience parallels with the standard experience of an international school student, because they also deal with those same pressures, whether you're in an IB school, whether you're in a Cambridge school, the pressure is pretty much the same as far as being able to perform, because in the end, that's what holds the most merit in the eyes of many people, including your parents.
Yes.
And that also factors in different cultural contexts. But now, as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering, when did the light bulb come on? Like that moment when you realize, you know what? I don't have to be all those things in order to be validated as a student. I could really just be me, and that's okay. I have my attributes and I have my areas where, maybe I'm not as good, but I'm still me.
Right. I think some of that happened in college, but I really think as a student, it's happened more as like a student of life. My master's degree, there was some of that because I was focused on special education, behavioral and emotional disabilities. It was things I was very passionate about. So I found, that my strengths were more highlighted in those studies, because it was studies that I was interested in and passions that I had. But I would not say that I don't think a light bulb came on for me in my regular K-12 schooling. I don't think there was a time that I was like, oh, I don't have to be this. I think I very much was striving for that all the way through and feeling ashamed or guilty if I wasn't meeting the expectations that the school or the community or society or whatever had in that capacity. So I very much feel that for kids now, looking in our international schools, as you said, because we're still the markers of success, it hasn't changed that much. And there's not other pathways to graduation that are going to highlight anything other than exactly what we're talking about right now. So I wouldn't say the light bulb came on until somewhere in my 20s, really, which is so unfortunate, right? But at least it did, recognizing that, I actually, in my master's, I am a good student and I can do really well without stretching myself into these places that are not natural to me. When I'm studying something that I'm passionate about, when I have professors that are, more, I guess, flexible in terms of assessment and leaning into creativity as opposed to just rigidity. But it was my master's, and then my postgraduate studies were with a program through Harvard Business School, and that was really enlightening to me as a student, because it was this very collaborative program around educational leadership and business that just allowed a very different way of learning. You know, we weren't taking tests, we weren't scoring in the traditional ways that I had always been scored or graded. And it was, it made me realize, well, I am a good student, but not in the capacity that, you know, necessarily that the high school had always set these standards for. I did okay in high school, but it was hard because I was trying to fit myself into boxes that I don't think really come naturally.
So it was more of the social pressures of high school, just being with the in crowd,
For sure.
being a part of this clique.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm.
Pressures around that. I was an athlete, so you know that comes with its own pressures as well. Pressures of the religion, pressures of the academic. So yeah, when I think back on high school, I wouldn't want to relive it. I'm good on that. College was much more. I knew myself better in college, and then after college, and I'm grateful for that. But yeah, there was no light bulb in K-12, and that makes me sad to say.
Yeah. But I think there are a lot of people who didn't get that epiphany until much later in life. So you're definitely not alone in that. Now, in terms of how your perspective around inclusion was shaped, right? You spend all this time in North Carolina. You eventually leave home to go abroad.
Yep.
And you've been in all these different countries. I know you spent time in Qatar. I mean, you were just in Rwanda. Now you're here in Cyprus, and you've been to other countries. Knowing the different cultural dynamics within those countries, how did all that help to shape your perspective of inclusion?
You know, when I first moved into special education, I had spent some time in college in Niger. That was my first international experience. Actually, was some volunteer work in Niger, West Africa. But out that really started to shape my view of everything, right? Of all the cultural beliefs and norms that I had established, my religious beliefs, everything was challenged by that first experience in Niger, which I'm forever grateful for. And I went back many times. But I taught public school in the US actually when I started. And then I moved into special education still in the US and public. And then I lived in Nigeria and South Sudan actually in my 20s. And I think my cross-cultural experience, of course, up until now, has shaped my understanding of inclusion because, well, in so many ways. But the US, when we think about neuro-inclusion specifically with special education, neurodiversity in our schools and in our society, there are many things that I wouldn't necessarily say the US does well, but in terms of how services in public schools are subsidized, and in terms of how the US has moved in speaking about neurodiversity, and in some ways, more than other places, maybe normalizing and embracing neurodiversity and disability, that is not everywhere. And cultural context, it matters the most. So when I'm working with schools or organizations in various places, I cannot come in with the same approach that I used in Angola and take it into a school in Cyprus. That doesn't work. Context matters, beliefs matter, and that comes not just from your own school experience, but deeply, deeply rooted in the culture of the place. And so I just think coming into this work in every place is very, very different and nuanced because the culture and the context matter. So we absolutely cannot have this boxed approach to any inclusion work in any place, because we have to understand, for me at the root, we have to understand what our communities believe about inclusion. And until we understand that, what the beliefs are, what the experiences are, we actually can't bring together a culture of inclusion in a school community unless we understand what's at the root, right? What are the mindsets and the beliefs and the experiences that the members of our community have had. So I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent.
No, this is perfect because the next question was actually going to be about that. So as somebody who has worked with many schools, many organizations, and part of that work has involved having to change mindsets and shifting people to think differently about inclusion. I'm wondering, in general, of course, because you've been in different contexts, what are some of the low hanging fruit that you try to identify when you are either auditing or assessing a school or organization's inclusion system or their approach?
So when I'm working with a system, and obviously I did this work in Qatar and also in Rwanda, but then now when I'm partnering with schools as a consultant, a
Yeah.
lot of, before I ever get there, a lot of the work is pre-work and understanding exactly what I just talked about. What are the beliefs, the mindsets? What is the culture at the school around this? Is there a culture of, well, those are student support kids. Those are not my kids. Like we've got to get to
Mm,
that before you do anything else with an audit. But the beliefs and the mindsets and the cultural piece are at the core. So you can't build anything without that. So I can audit systems, right? Is your multi-tiered system of support, like where are the gaps? Yes. Are you implementing great UDL practices? We can do that work. But like, if we are doing that work and we are not looking at the cultural foundation piece first, then it's not going to stick. So the key levers in an audit to start are, like, before I ever get on the ground, are trying to, through conversations, through meetings, through surveys, different information gathering tools, trying to figure out what do people really believe and what are the values that are held and what are the beliefs that come from experiences and the cultural norms around neuro-inclusion in the context. And it looks very different in different schools. Like I just worked with a school actually in Rwanda, and most of the staff are Rwandan. And that was,
mhm.
so that was interesting because it wasn't as international. The staff wasn't as international and the kids weren't either. So there was more continuity around the cultural beliefs of inclusion. Sometimes if you're working with a school that has 40, 60 different nationalities in the staff, well, people are going to have very, very varied beliefs, expectations, and experiences with inclusion in their cultural context. So how do we
That's
bring
right.
people together? And I believe that, and I have seen this work, that we bring people together in a number of ways. Part of it is having cultures of trust in our schools where people can share, like, I'm scared of this, or this is what I think, or this is what I experienced when I was younger, to be able to quell those fears through in various ways. But I also think we have to give people new experiences. So if, for example, if a parent is worried that if the autistic student comes into their class, that it might cause some upheaval for their own student, what we have to do is accept that autistic kid into our community. And we have to show that parent that actually their child is so much better off because the autistic kid is there in that classroom. So I really believe that new experiences are what shape beliefs, and it changes beliefs. It's experiences that do that. I can't remember the name of the two guys that wrote the book about the results pyramid, but this is based on that work.
Mhm.
I just think
Yeah.
we've got to give new experiences to change beliefs, and it's slow work, but it's the important work. So the first work
Yeah.
is there. And then I speak with different stakeholders in audits, of course, all the different stakeholders, lots of observations, just trying to get a feel for the systems that are in place, but also the culture. So it's both.
And I think on top of that, you're competing against a culture that's heavily influenced by high stakes testing.
Yes.
Whether you're talking about the local level or even within our international schools, right? We
Yes.
have to compete against that. And it's not a situation where you have assessments that are being modified for different learners. They are normed assessments. Everybody's taking the same assessment. There's no, you don't have multiple access points for all these different learners. So
Nope.
when these are the parameters that you're working with, I think that also contributes to the difficulty that comes with shifting mindsets when it comes to neuro
Yes.
inclusion and just the importance of just understanding that.
Exactly. Part of that is related to the pathways that I was mentioning earlier, right? We only have one
Mhm.
pathway to graduation, so you have to perform at this level. And there are all
Right.
these expectations around assessments. And yeah, we're testing kids. You know, in theory, right? We're testing a kid in a wheelchair on the stairs. Like, why are we doing that? Why are we testing them without modifications or accommodations? That makes absolutely no sense. There's so many things that I feel like we've held on to in education and we're missing the mark. What are we actually trying to get at? Do we want to know if our students know what we are trying to teach them, or do we want to know if they can do it in a 20-minute time test, right? Or do we want to know if they can do it in a quiet environment? Whatever. I don't understand at times like why we can't let go of the norms that have existed throughout time, and it really keeps our kids from shining. So yes, you're absolutely right. I think there's not space for flexibility in assessment and in how we're still grading this, the same old ways. And we're really missing out on highlighting such incredible gifts and strengths of our kids by holding on to these same methods that we've used for so many years.
And I'm just thinking about your time at your school in Rwanda, because currently I'm in a school that's similar in the staff makeup,
Okay.
where you have is pretty much a Zambian who come into this international school context. They're trying to figure out how to get acclimated to that because it's so foreign to them. So I'm wondering, in a situation like the one you were in Rwanda, how much of a factor do you believe the teacher training institutions have in terms of teachers not being fully prepared to take on diverse learners, particularly those who are neurodiverse?
Right. Oh, I'm glad you're asking that question. So actually, the school I just worked with in Rwanda was not the school that I was head at. I was back there for ASA, and I worked with a different school. It's a school of 2,000 kids. My school that I was head at had a really diverse staff. But that question about teacher training, when I left the headship in Rwanda, I stayed there consulting with the Ministry of Education, and this was a big part
Mm,
of the conversation. So in the end, we're looking at the whole scope of schools across Rwanda. I can't even remember how many kids, but it's well over it's millions of kids that we are looking
sure.
at potentially, and we're trying to train in schools, and we're trying to upskill teachers in schools. And how can we give them enough training to be able to support neurodivergent learners in classes of 60, right? Like huge classes. And ultimately, it comes down to teacher training in university because so I think it's a pivotal piece of this work. Like if countries are looking at shifting their approach to neuro-inclusion, it has to start with university training and teacher training programs, because you're almost trying to catch up, right? If you're doing it by the time teachers are already teaching. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, why not start from the beginning and build our teachers' knowledge and expertise around designing by removing barriers and designing with everyone in mind. So I
Yes.
think teacher training programs are a pivotal piece of this. Just like when we're thinking of designing learning curriculums, building, it's like, let's just start from the beginning that way instead of going in and renovating or going in and making different modifications or edits. Let's just design without that. And it's the same with teacher training programs. Let's just start from the beginning where everyone has that knowledge instead of then trying to upskill later on.
For sure, for sure. And then I know we're talking about challenges, and we've mentioned the fact that there is a need for more professional learning. There's also a need for capacity building. But I'm also wondering about some of these other emerging challenges. So thinking about technology, for example, if we have students who have more severe disabilities, is there access to assistive technologies that allows them to have better access to learning? Um, and maybe a few other resources that schools need. How do all these impact how folks think about inclusion within schools from your perspective?
Right. I think oftentimes schools and educators and leaders may not be aware of all the resources that do exist to fill the gaps in their context. Like Okay, so for example, in Rwanda, we didn't have occupational therapists or speech therapists in the community that we really could lean on, but we wanted to
Sure.
accept kids that needed those services. Well, there's incredible virtual services that are available that we were able to access, and then we had instructional assistants sit in on those sessions and learn the skills and be able to then implement them in the classroom. It's incredible. So I think sometimes, I don't know if this answers your question exactly. I think sometimes we're saying no to kids because we're like, well, we don't have the assistive technology, or we don't have the expertise in the community, or we don't have the mental health services, for example. But are we thinking innovatively about how we could potentially build that in different ways? Like, could
Mhm.
we have a hybrid service model? Why not? Like, could we try it? I mean, could we try, if we don't have the right mental health professional, could we try online or virtual counseling or therapy services? Uh,
Right.
with teacher training, like I think, I think there's so many different options for teacher training, and I wish schools would collaborate more around it. Like, instead of just isolated schools taking this training or that training, like, let's come together and share the cost and do a training all together. I just think there's different ways we can look at this if we start to, yeah, think outside the box and then also talk to each other. And I think that's a big part of the innovative piece of inclusion. Like, if we could get schools to talk to each other, and not just international schools, but also with your community public schools, right? Local
Mhm.
schools around you. Why not share? Like, if I'm coming into your school to lead a training around some type of inclusion in your community, or executive functioning, or universal design for learning, could we just invite some folks from the local school too to come? Like, let's just share. So I think, yeah, I think part of it is innovative thinking, and how do we put together systems and programs that may not be traditional the way we have seen it in other places, but could still work for kids. And then how do we talk to each other, share what has worked, share resources. So I think it's kind of twofold.
And I agree with you about the access piece, as far as having some of the local schools liaise with international schools. I feel like that should be something that's more commonplace. And
Me too.
I know, like, it's case by case, of course, but unfortunately, there is a certain level of gatekeeping that does happen, that does prevent some of those local schools from getting access to these learning opportunities and resources. So, I mean,
Exactly.
that's another conversation, but it's something that I think is applicable in this situation.
I think that too. Like, I just think about how far our reach could be if we stopped that gatekeeping. It's a big thing I'm very passionate about, is how do we share what we're doing? If we have great practices, we have great tools, like, what are we trying to do with that? Just keep it just for our kids? No, the point is that we're going to impact, larger groups of children around the world. So, yes, agreed.
For sure. And you are doing that in your own way. So I know recently you just put together your neuro-inclusion teaching toolkit, which people can find on
Yes.
YouTube, on your channel, and we'll put that information in the show notes. But talk to me
Thank you.
about the toolkit, because I think it's fascinating how you were able to collab with some folks I know, and others I was able to learn about through the series, and just kind of talk a little bit about some of the resources people can tap into through this toolkit.
Yes. So the toolkit was birthed out of this conversation with, I was at a women's symposium with ISS, and I've been talking with Maimuna Sacco, who's a friend, Centennia
Yeah,
McNeil.
Maimuna.
Yes, yes, yes. And I was telling them how we were talking about how exactly what you and I were just talking about, how we feel like there's so much access to so much great learning for international schools, and why is it not accessible to every school? Right. It doesn't make sense, right? We need to ensure that if we're really saying that we want schools to be more inclusive, we want every school to be more inclusive, not just schools that have, large tuition fees, and certain demographics of students and families. And so we were all in agreement about this, and it's something I'd really been thinking about. How do we make learning around neuro inclusion more accessible to schools around the world? So the toolkit came from that. I understand you have to have internet because it is on YouTube, which I know has its own kind of issues. but at least it's a free resource. It's 10 parts. It's 10 women from around the world that are experts in various fields that I just reached out to all these folks that I had met throughout my time in Qatar, throughout various international experiences, and said, hey, this is the idea. This is what we're thinking. Would you want to lead some learning in this? Would you want to be part of this? I never anticipated that almost all of them said yes, which was such a gift. So to be able, first of all, we all got to collaborate together, which was nice, just to bring, different voices together in that way. But then the learning was just invaluable. So there's all sorts of different learning. You don't have to do the whole thing at all, but if you wanted to, you could move through it with your team. You can move through it with your whole staff. You can move through it individually. It's all free and available. And then there's a Padlet that had the resources that all the workshop leaders shared during their presentation. So that's available as well to participants. And there's all sorts of different learning. So how do we use data to drive instruction? How do we shift the conversation around why neurodiversity is a strength and a gift? How do we support students with ADHD? The last session was about how teachers support themselves and can really facilitate their own well-being and ensure that they know when they're burning out and what they need, which I think is a big part of this conversation. We can't support kids well unless we also feel well. Centennia led a session about how we partner with families. We had an occupational therapist lead a session about the connection between motor skill development and literacy. I mean, it's these women are just incredible experts. And so to come together and put it together for free, we were all like, everyone was without hesitation. Yes, let's go. So it was a learning experience. It was really wonderful. And I think, eventually we'll probably do something again. But my hope is that more people learn about the toolkit because they can use it with their staff. And it's something that's free for any school anywhere.
And just a tip, if you're in a place where power goes in and out, download it while you have power. Download the whole thing. That way you can access it offline.
Yes, exactly.
Like
yep.
one
That's
video
true.
at a
That
time.
makes me feel better because I was like, accessible, but you're right. You can download it if you have connectivity at some point.
Yes. So just wanted to add that part. But man, Lauren, you're doing so much. I mean, you got the toolkit going on. Man, you're going to all these different spaces and just advocating for folks to just really be in tune with this inclusion work, which I feel is so imperative, especially now, at a time where funding is going down for resources that can help learners have better access to the education. To be able to step up in that way is just commendable. And then I want you to talk about the Guardian Project too, because this is the other big thing that you've been raving about. And I know this is a collaborative effort as well. So just give us some background about that. And what are some of the needs that you believe the Guardian Project can address in this current landscape of education?
I'm glad we're talking about this as well, because actually it builds exactly on the conversation we just had about gatekeeping and sharing and collaborating. Yeah. So the Guardian Project it's a nonprofit organization. The whole vision is to have a movement of schools that are building a community to protect and serve our kids in the future as it is now, which is very different than what you and I, experienced when we were younger. And the founder of the Guardian Project is Robert Landau. He is experienced in international schools for many years. And he really had this epiphany saying, I cannot look at my grandkids and promise them the same future that my parents promised me. Like, oh, just work hard and, study and you'll be successful. Like, it's not, the future looks very different now. And so how do we ensure our schools are protecting and serving our kids? How are we changing the course of education, the role of the teacher, the role of the credit, what we were just talking about, and assessment, to be sure our kids are prepared for the future and protecting and serving one another. So a huge piece of the Guardian Project is around building community, building sustainability, building inclusive systems and societies and that are healthy. And I think what sets the Guardian Project apart is that schools that are doing this work already, and it brings those schools together. So we have events and conversations and professional development that brings everyone into the room. And so if you're doing great work in global citizenship, then share what you're doing so other schools can find their story and their path through your work. Because why are we gatekeeping? Just like what you just said a few minutes ago. There's frameworks for how you can move through. There's 5 promises in the Guardian Project and how you can move through those promises. And then part of it is also schools becoming guardians of guardians. It's exactly what we just talked about with local schools. So you're not doing this work in global citizenship or inclusion or service learning alone. You are bringing local and public schools around you on and becoming a guardians of guardians, and sharing the resources, sharing the learning, and building that journey together. What helps the schools that are working with us now are saying that it helps to have indicators of success, to have a framework, and to have the community. For me, a big part of the Guardian Project that drew me to it is this community piece. Like, let's come together to do work together. Let's collaborate. Let's share ideas. If something's working for you, how could it work for us? I just remember as a head of school, so much of the work I was doing, I was having to reach out to other wonderful heads across the continent of Africa and say, how are you doing this? How are you doing that? The Guardian Project can facilitate that. And it's a nonprofit, it's registration based, and there's a recognition system if you want to kind of move through the framework. But it's really about building community, sharing resources, and changing the narrative around how we are supporting our kids, preparing them for the future. So it's really exciting. And I'm so grateful to be partnering with Aaron and Robert as co-directors on this work.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you did mention how schools can be involved with the Guardian Project. So you say it's registration based?
Yeah. So you can register. It's really, I don't have all the numbers in my head right now, but it's pretty affordable, and you get access to all of the resources that are available through the Guardian Project website. You get access to the community, all of the professional developments that we have. We have facilitated conversations, and then also there's a consortium of consultants that we're still building. We just started building. Some of them, Maymuna is one, Trisha Friedman is one, Leanne Lavender.
Oh, Trisha, yeah, it's my people, yeah.
Liz Cho, Aaron and I, of course, and Robert. So you get access to the consortium of consultants. And then if you are a school that's like, okay, we need to build our global citizenship program and our student support program, well, then Aaron and I can come in collaboratively, and we can help you do that. And it's a discounted rate, actually, if you're a Guardian Project school, instead of having these isolated projects. So it's kind of a wraparound support, like, let's do this work together. And there's so much intersection between different aspects of this work. So as a school, you get access to a lot of different resources, to the community, the conversations, the learning, and the consortium of consultants.
So this is an all-inclusive type of deal where you get all access to all these different resources.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So I know. And that's, for me, that was a huge part of it too, right? Instead of just in isolation, okay, we're going to build, our service learning program, but then in 3 years, we're going to build our student support program. Let's look at how we can just do wrap around and grow this thing all together, because it all just intersects, right? So these things don't happen in isolation. And also, schools shouldn't be working on this work in isolation. If someone's doing something great in one place, why can I not learn from that? And if they have a great framework, why should we not be sharing that? I just think we'll move further if we move together. And we're stronger when we do this work together. So I think it's such a fantastic framework, and I hope we have more schools join us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Lauren, I can honestly say this, and maybe you feel the same way. I just believe that you're just in your season right now. I feel like so many incredible things have just been going on with you. All happen around the same time, just converging. I don't know if you feel that same feeling, like things are just starting to come together.
I do feel that, and I feel so much gratitude because of that. Like I feel like when you start as a consultant, I chose to consult in this work because it's what I'm passionate about, because I believe it,
That's
because I've
right.
seen what it does to change communities, right? Like this is something that I so wholeheartedly with my whole being know is the right thing. But you don't know if other people are going to feel connected to the work you're doing, right? You're just not sure what it's going to look like. When I first started, and I do feel like in the last months that between the work I've helped, I facilitated the playbook for expanding and enhancing student support with the Office of Overseas Schools. That has this wonderful energy, and it was collaborative. It was bringing schools from around the world together to build this resource so that you're not isolated trying to figure out how to build your student support program. There's so many projects I've been able to work on that do have this theme of collaboration around the world. And I feel so much gratitude for what I've been able to be a part of. I've had wonderful people in my corner championing me and supporting me, and I'm just forever grateful. Too many to name right here, but I've been really, really fortunate. So filled with gratitude for sure. But thank you for saying that.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think people pay attention. I know I pay attention. Like when I see people out there winning, I feel like I'm winning, especially when it's people who I respect dearly as far as their work and how they approach education in the way that I do. Like, it's never a competition for me. It's like, oh, they're doing this incredible thing. That's going to help everybody. That's going to
Yes.
make my life easier. It's going to make the next person's classroom easier to manage. I just look at it in that way. There's
I
just
feel
room for all this innovation to take place.
I feel the exact same way, and I've had so many conversations in the last few months with um, all people from around the world. I met Leanne Jung, who is I've always kind of admired her from afar as an inclusion consultant. She's so smart and so thoughtful, and I met her at Yurkos like a month ago, and we were like, yes, we are in each other's corners. We're going to support each other. Maymuna and we do some of the same work, and I will recommend her to other people and she will recommend me. I see no space for competition in this. Like we have to lift each other up and support each other. And I hope every chance I get, shout out people and elevate people in the same way that, I've been fortunate to have people do for me, but I feel the same way. I just think there's so many children in the world. There's so many communities in the world that need this support. So we cannot gatekeep and we cannot compete. We have to come together and we'll do it better in that way. So I really strongly believe that. I'm glad you said that.
Yes, for sure. And then before I get to this final question and wrap up, people who have not been in consulting like you and
Mhm.
I think it's important for them to understand how difficult it is to be a consultant. Even with all the years of experience you come with, all the expertise, all the receipts, right? All the knowledge and the wisdom that you contain. Sometimes that's not enough to get opportunities. Sometimes not enough to even be in spaces where your expertise could be beneficial. So for you to be able to finally break through in the way you have, I hope that whoever is watching, particularly somebody that is aspiring to become a consultant, they see what it can be. Maybe it's not the same path, but at least they know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
But it does require some persistence. It does require some perseverance. You will
It
need to
does.
go through some periods of rejection. You will hear lots of no's before you
Yes,
hear a yes.
exactly. That's so true. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you got to keep pushing because people watch. Somebody's watching you. Even when you think they're not, somebody's watching you.
That's such a good word, right? Yep. I know. My first months, like I was doing so many things for free, right? I was like, I've got to get this out. I've got to get myself out there. I've got to get the work I'm doing out there. And yeah, you do. You take a risk on yourself when you start your own business, when you start consulting. But yes, be encouraged that just continue to do the good work. Stick with what you know is true to who you are. Like, I haven't pivoted. I haven't accepted any work that does not align wholeheartedly with my ethics and my morals.
That's right.
So yeah, hustle hard. And yeah, you will get no's, and just don't give up. It's the persistence. You're absolutely right.
It's the persistence. And with that, we come to the final question, my favorite one. How do you stay true to the teacher in you?
For me, like, the work I'm doing now, when I'm training or I'm like coaching, talking with people, developing resources, it all comes back to stories, because that is what has shaped the teacher that I was and that I still am. It's the stories. Like, I do this work because of Ishmael. I do this work because of Deshaun. I do this work because of Malaysia. Like, I have their names and their stories, and it makes me feel a little bit of feelings, but that is, I stay true to the teacher I am because it's the stories that drive the learning that I do with schools, that drive anything I'm creating. It comes back to those stories and those kids. So I think grounding myself in that and staying connected with some of those families and some of those kids, and trying, when I'm working with schools, I still take the time to sit with kids and hear their stories and sit with families. And I think that's really important in consulting, that you don't just end up in the room with a leadership team or just doing a teacher training, but you're hearing from people, you're hearing from the community, and the stories are what will hold you to who you are and the educator that you are.
And with that, we're going to wrap up here. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a beautiful conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you too. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor.
Yes. And then finally, please let people know how they can connect with you on social media. Feel free to drop your websites, any upcoming events, projects that you want people to know about.
Okay. Do I just give that to you, or do I drop it? Tell me where to put that.
You can give it to me off air, but since we on air, if you want to just drop a quick word for folks.
Okay. I am on LinkedIn. So that is where I feel like I post a lot on LinkedIn, and then I'll also share my, I'll share the Guardian Project website, and I'll share my Instagram as well. So yeah, be sure to follow me there, connect with me. And if there's any way I can support you or your school, I would love to.
Yes. And we'll have all that in the episode notes. So you all will get information on that. You could also just type those names in and it should come right up. I've done it, so I know that for a fact. So on behalf of Lauren, everybody, want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode of IDTALK Educators Live. And as always, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.